This is it. Yes, as we're going to talk a bit about King Lear. So one might say, in the words of Edgar and Kent, is this the promised end? Yes. Or image of that horror? Maybe it's appropriate, given that one of the ideas or themes that's come up repeatedly, along with graveyards, has been the thought that somehow Shakespeare in the theatre loses or distorts what we get from it as readers. So it's good that we have an homme du théâtre at the end to remind us of what theatre can do, maybe. And Mark Ravenhill, my friend Philip Ottoman at the Guardian newspaper, tells me that Mark is big in Germany. So maybe I don't need to introduce him. And indeed, you wrote a play about German unification, which is a bit of a... Didn't you not?
Yeah, I wrote a play called Drüben, or over there, about twins, East European German twins, but for a Gastspieler at the Schaubühne.
So maybe I shouldn't... He doesn't need introducing, but he's a playwright, of course, and as you'll see in a minute, a performer, sometimes too, and director, and a one-time enfant terrible. I was daring myself to say this, so I will say it. I've asked several Germans, and they say in the cause of literature one can say anything. And he began his career at the Royal Court with the play in 1996, Shopping and Fucking. I hesitated a lot. I thought a lot about saying it. I have now said it.
It sounds a little bit softer in German. It's Shoppen and Ficken.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit nicer.
Yeah. I had to think a lot about it. My dear mother's not here. Vielleicht bin ich ein bisschen verklemmt. Entschuldigung. See, that's my third German sentence. You were wondering what the third one was. It's a very, very useful one. Vielleicht bin ich ein bisschen verklemmt. And anyway, Mark. So we're going to start. We're going to do what we've done in each session so far, which is to have some Shakespeare first, but with a bit of a variation, because we're going to start with a sonnet which is not by Shakespeare, but to Shakespeare. Maybe you'd like to explain, Mark.
Yes, for the last 2 years, I was a playwright in residence at the Royal Shakespeare Company. I've now been released into the community, but I was in a cottage in Stratford for 2 years, which was fantastic, actually. It was very joyful, and one of the small things that I did while I was there for Shakespeare's birthday, I wrote a sonnet, which was quite a good German translation, though my friends at the BE translated it into German. It was in a program book for the BE. So this is actually addressed to Shakespeare, so I have to slightly play you and play him, but he's there. So it's a sonnet for Shakespeare's birthday, April 2012. I envy you. Your world was new, unmapped. The language that you wrote in barely fixed. You were Shakespeare or Shakespeare, whatever form your willful pen chose to take each day. Great continents of human thought and heart were not yet owned by any national tongue and were yours to chart, conquer, describe, sell. You made an empire of our language in your globe. And now we rush to patent every cell of being. We brand ourselves with jingles. Every word we speak or write is trade. And our little lives are ended with a deal. You taught us language, and there's profit on't. But still a greater possibility to curse. So I guess that's where the ficken comes in.
So, tell us about it. Tell us about it, Mark. Why is it a greater possibility to curse thanks to Shakespeare?
There are fantastic curses. We were talking earlier, actually, about the insults. We've got a great thing in the bar at Stratford-upon-Avon, and when you come to Stratford-upon-Avon, asks for the insults chair. We got actors to record various insults from Shakespeare. I think one of my favourites, I've always liked the Richard III. I guess it's probably Margaret. She spends 75% of her time cursing. I think it's foul, abortive hedgehog, which I'm very keen on. You can sit in the insults chair in the bar at Stratford, and your bum hitting the seat triggers recordings of actors using Shakespearean insults. Some people know they're going to sit on the insult chair, specifically ask for the insult chair, but it's quite fun to sit in the bar and watch those people who don't know, because it looks a bit like a throne. They think, I've got the best chair in the house. They sit, and you foul abortive hedgehog, and that's rather fun as well. So as well as the many other delights of Stratford-upon-Avon, there are various Shakespeare fish and chip shops, Shakespeare ice cream vans. Look out for the insults chair.
My favourite one, after all that, wonderful sort of Thersites ones and wonderful elaborate ones, my favourite, very simple one, Falstaff and Hal having this, an insult kind of competition, don't they? And Falstaff rounds it off by saying, after these incredibly elaborate ones, he says, "Thou vile standing tuck." And I have no idea what it means, but it just seems completely after that, you've lost, haven't you?
Yeah.
Vile he definitely is Henry V. He's a vile standing tuck still, I think.
Yes, and it probably works as well in the Neil Simon play. I think it's the Sunshine Boys. The old comedian's giving advice, and he says C's are funny and K's are funny.
Right.
So probably C and K together, you're double funny.
I had a real thrill recently in a restaurant when something was being served up that had to be eaten with mustard. And I remember Falstaff accuses somebody of having wits as thick as Tewkesbury mustard, which sounds good. For the first time, somebody said, "We've got some Tewkesbury mustard." And I could completely see what he was on about, There it was. You could stand any amount of cutlery up in it. Thick as anything. We're going to... Great sonnet. We're going to hear some more Shakespeare now, some real Shakespeare.
Real Shakespeare, real writing.
I didn't mean it like that.
It's all right.
So, do you want to tell everybody what it is?
Yes, it's from King Lear, which if you do lists, I guess it's probably my favourite play. I noticed that Michael Billington's review of this new production that's been mentioned quite a lot at the National Theatre said that King Lear is a play to be endured as much as enjoyed. So maybe it's something slightly masochistic that leads me to King Lear. But actually, I spoke about that real sourness and bitterness and that I felt with Troilus and Cressida, and King Lear does put, and we talked about Nahum Tate's feeling that the play just couldn't be that cruel, and there is that huge, and every audience, I think, forgets, even if you've read the play 1,000 times, it just feels so unjust that Cordelia is going to be brought on at that moment. But even though there is that bleakness, and nothing is such a key word in particularly in King Lear, there's a sense that there is nothing, and yet there is something curative about it. I think that's one of the things I wanted to talk about was the cure. I think not healing. I think we tend to confuse healing and curing, but I think there's a cure that happens through suffering in King Lear that I both enjoy and endure, and the enjoyment and the endurance are the same thing. I think more pleasurable than that. I mean, I'm very glad I spent that time with Troilus and Cressida, but I did feel very suicidal for a lot of the time.
Okay, well, read us.
So we've got Gloucester, we've got Edgar. I'm sure you're very aware that Gloucester is blinded. and he can't see. He doesn't know who he's with, and he's being led by a figure, and he's not quite sure who that figure is. So I will be playing two parts. I will be taking the part of Gloucester and the part of Edgar, which is quite a challenge. Right. I won't say their names every time, but my first voice is Gloucester, my second voice is Edgar. When shall I come to the top of that same hill? You do climb it now. Look how we labour. Methinks the ground is even, horrible steep. Hark, do you hear the sea? No, truly. Why then your other senses grow imperfect by your eyes' anguish. So may it be indeed. Methinks thy voice is altered, and thou speakst in better phrase and matter than thou didst. You're much deceived. Nothing am I changed but in my garments. Methinks y'are better spoken. Come on, sir, here's the place. Stand still. How fearful and dizzy it is to cast one's eyes so low. The crows and choughs that wing the midway air show scarce so gross as beetles. Halfway down hangs one that gathers samphire, dreadful trade. Methinks he seems no bigger than his head. The fishermen that walk upon the beach appear like mice, and yon tall anchoring bark diminished her cock a buoy almost too small for sight. The murmuring surge that on the unnumbered idle pebble chafes cannot be heard so high. I'll look no more, lest my brain turn and the deficient sight topple down headlong. Let me where you stand. Give me your hand. You are now within a foot of the extreme verge. For all beneath the moon, I would not leap upright. Let go my hand. Here, friends, another purse. In it a jewel well worth a poor man's taking. Fairies and gods prosper it with thee. Go there further off. Bid me farewell, and let me hear thy going. Now, fare thee well, good sir. With all my heart, why I do trifle thus with his despair is done to cure it. Oh, you mighty gods, this world I do renounce, and in your sights shake patiently my great affliction off. If I could bear it longer and not fall to quarrel with your greater opposeless wills, my snuff and loathed part of nature should burn itself out. If Edgar live, oh bless him. Now, fellow, fare thee well. Gone, sir, farewell. And yet, I know not how conceit may rob the treasury of life, then life itself yields to the theft. Had he been where he thought, by this his thought had passed. Alive or dead? Ho, you, sir, friend? Hear you, sir? Speak. Thus might he pass, indeed. Yet he revives. What are you, sir? Away and let me die. Hadst thou been aught but gossamer's feathers, ere so many fathom down precipitating, thou hast shivered like an egg. But thou dost breathe, hast heavy substance, bleeds not, speakst, art sound. 10 masts at each make not the altitude which thou hast perpendiculously fall. Thy life's a miracle. Speak yet again. But have I fallen or no? From the dread summit of this chalky bourne. Look up a height. The shrill and ill-gorged lark so far cannot be seen or heard. Do but look up. like I have no eyes. His wretchedness deprived that benefit to end itself by death. 'Twas yet some comfort when misery could beguile the tyrant's rage and frustrate his proud will. Give me your arm. Up, so. How is't? Feel your legs, you stand. Too well. This is above all strangeness. Upon the crown of the cliff, what thing was that which parted from you, a poor unfortunate beggar? As I stood below, methought his eyes were two full moons. He had 1,000 noses, horns whelped and waved like the enrigid sea. It was some fiend. Therefore, thou happy father, thinks that the clearest gods who make them honours of men's impossibilities have preserved thee. I do remember it now. Henceforth I'll bear affliction till it do cry out itself, enough, enough, and die. That thing you speak of, I took it for a man. Often 'twould say, the fiend, the fiend. He led me to that place. Bear free and patient thoughts. Enter King Lear.
So, tell us about why you chose. I mean, it's fantastic, but why did you choose it, apart from the fact that it's...
Well, it wouldn't be so great if you read it. It is a piece of theatre. It's about many things, obviously, but it is a piece of theatre about theatre. Edgar is creating a world for Lear for Gloucester through words. This blind man is seeing through words what he can't see anymore. And the physical moment, which I thought, shall I attempt it? But I didn't, of actually just kneeling and then throwing himself forward. That's an incredibly powerful theatrical moment that we don't feel as urgently on the stage. And then the slipperiness of personality, of character. We know it's an actor playing a part. And Edgar's able to use acting to play these different people, and it's interesting at the end that Gloucester seems to be joining him in the game, or have been fooled that actually he doesn't ever seem to have perceived the poor beggar man as a fiend, but he's then joins in the game of pretend. So there is a lot of Shakespeare that is one of its themes is the themes again and again is the nature of acting, the nature of theatre, the nature of taking on a role, and the power of words to make us and make a world. And so those things seem inherently of the theatre to me.
And what about you mentioned the word cure at the beginning, and the word cure is in the dialogue. In this particular scene, or in this particular episode, Edgar seems to be saying, he says, doesn't he, why do I trifle thus with his he turns to the audience, saying, you ask, what am I doing this for?
Yeah.
And we are wondering about that. And it does seem to, why is this a cure for despair?
I think there's often a strong sense in everything from Petruchio's use of Kate. I mean, often there's great cruelty at Petruchio's use of Kate, but Malvolio, time and time again, I guess, in a way, Leontes, and a sense of curing somebody. And our contemporary idea is that we heal. We heal people that somehow kindly act. But I think often in Shakespeare, the cure is something that almost kills you, and that there's a necessary cruelty in in the cure. And I guess we could say that medicine was a very, very different thing. But actually, it still strikes me when I'm in a hospital how unsophisticated medicine is. That there's still something very barbaric about medicine, and that actually when I've been quite ill a number of times, and when you go into that hospital, there's as much cruelty, and maybe necessary cruelty, but there's something cruel about the cure, and I think that's a recurrent pattern in Shakespeare. One of his certainly he was drawing on Ovid and metamorphosis, so there's a bigger thing of change, and sometimes change is joyful and instant and positive, but also there's that other change which is slow and harder, and you might come out a different person at the end, but you might not be a better person at the end. But it's necessary for human beings to go through that change and to be cured, even if the cure and the kill are very closely connected.
I think the example that you chose from King Lear of what you've just talked about, until we all think of, there's a characteristic Shakespearean cruelty, if you like, which usually depends on a disguise, doesn't it? In this case, Edgar only has to disguise his voice, and that too becomes a topic that your voice is changing. And he has to disguise his voice because Gloucester is blind. But very commonly in the play, somebody disguises themselves, and often for benign reasons. They trick them. They trick them, don't they? And I'm just thinking that too. I'm thinking again that the theme you started with of how when you read Twelfth Night, and you know that Viola is Cesario, it's something very different from when you see her disguised as a boy, and now that peculiar disguise that, of course, everybody can see through except the people on the stage. They're the only ones who can't.
And you have to, with the disguise thing, again, maybe, touching on the Shakespeare, our contemporary, I think that is something harder for us to buy into. And it doesn't explain it totally, but I think some part of an Elizabethan Jacobean audience's ability to buy into that is sumptuary law, that actually different classes, different professions were allowed to wear certain clothes, certain fabrics, certain cuts. I'm no great expert, but that's my understanding of it. Yeah. So actually, clothes maketh the man was truer. That actually, I guess we still don't, we English are perceived to be terribly class-bound, so maybe we still make lots of decisions about people based on their clothes. But actually written down in law that certain clothes were available. And that was certainly one of the fascinations, it's a slightly different topic, I guess that's one of the fascinations for the original audience, certainly, of going to see a Shakespeare play, is that you're watching these players who'd had no great status in law a lot of the time, wearing clothes that they weren't allowed. Not only is it boys playing women who play boys, but you're actually, everybody on that stage is wearing clothes that in the outside world are much more codified in law. So it's very difficult for us to have that same, there's something still a little bit transgressive about some cross-dressing, but the level of pleasure and carnival of seeing people wearing the wrong clothes must have been, whoa, it's so exciting. Again, can't get that on the page, guys. Have to see it in the theatre.
In one glorious scene of As You Like It, it's a boy playing, it would have been a boy playing a girl playing a boy playing a girl.
Yes, Rosalind comes to woo Orlando as
and they
Cesario,
say, yes.
Yeah.
And then they say, and she says, you play at being me. And yeah. So you have to, there's quite a lot to hold in your head when you're reading it. I was thinking also about the cruelty, the cruelty, apparently, curative cruelty of what Edgar seems to be doing to Gloucester reminds me of to some people, inexplicable. I say this advisedly because it's a set text for A-level for 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds in England at the moment. I interviewed a whole load of them the other day. They were doing Measure for Measure, and they told each one couldn't explain it. When the Duke, near the end of Measure for Measure, we were talking about it yesterday, but before he takes Isabella to be his wife, he does something very cruel, which is that he convinces, even though he has fixed everything, he makes her believe that her brother, Claudio, has been killed, even though he hasn't. And he makes her believe that the head is being brought on stage, even though it's not his head. Which I think is a brilliant sort of thing, but seems to, obviously, lots of people who read the play or see the play, certainly the former, an incredibly cruel thing to do.
And, there have been sort of Christian readings or Christian parallels made with the Duke. But I think it's as much about the power of the playwright, who we don't think we're gods. But that the sense of any author, that you have the power of the God that, of course, is then later maybe explored in Prospero. But that sense that the Duke has, that he can make anything happen, and that he can create quite complex and rather pointless plots, but just to see whether he has any duty of care to these people at all. I mean, he doesn't seem to be curing.
Do you not think? I mean, I was thinking.
Do you think he is? Well, I mean, he seems to me just to be saying, I can pull strings and see.
He's curing her of simple piety, isn't he, in a way?
Yes.
I mean, she has said, I'm willing to sacrifice my brother to save my virginity. Now, the Duke has fixed it so that the brother gets saved and the virginity gets saved. But she has to, if you like, taste what it's like to live by her principles. Feel what it's like to have those principles. Okay, you decided that, now he's dead.
I can't quite remember the sequence of events, but he doesn't know any of that when he decides to go into exile and come back just as a monk.
No, but he does. I mean, maybe that it's connected. I don't know. Maybe it's connected to the puzzle at the end of the play that we were talking about yesterday on the panel. She was going to be a nun. She's now going to be a married woman. She was absolutely inflexible, magnificently so, in her Christian virtue as a novice about to, and her attitude to her virginity. And there's a sense in which she is being at least taught a lesson, perhaps arguably cured of that sublime religious certainty. Yeah. Because she learns for a bit, it's a theatrical illusion. An illusion is how people are made to taste things.
Well, that's definitely what's happening here, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, I think the question of cruelty and art is something that sort of bothers me and interests me. Not actually the play that I wrote. I think it was that play that I wrote about the West German, East German twins. One of the English critics said, who always gives me bad reviews, but he said and it's a case he's wanted to say a time ago. There's cruelty in Mark Ravenhill's writing. And, you don't like to think of yourself as cruel, and, I try not to take the review, but I was sort of a bit, thought I'd be called cruel. And a friend of mine said, but you're right, you're writing, you're making art, you're writing plays, you're writing, that there's always cruelty in that, which maybe he just said to make me feel better. And it did make me feel a bit better, and it sort of left me with a puzzle, and I thought, yeah, maybe just this thing of setting up these situations and making people go through actions and go through suffering, both the performers and the audience, and maybe there is an element of cruelty in that. Maybe, it still sort of bothers me, but I guess it's quite good to have things as a writer that you don't, I guess it's essential to have things as a writer that you don't really know the answer with, too. So I think all the time I'm writing, not all the time, but during some stages of my writing, that question of, am I being cruel? Is cruelty necessary? as part of this process of writing. So I'm assuming that every writer, I don't know, writers confront that in themselves. And I think that does, it's not the answer, but I think in some way that must inform characters like the Duke and what Edgar's doing here. And yeah.
There's a sense of sort of the Duke does what Playwright, it sort of experiments on people. I mean, you're going to read in a minute a piece called The Experiment. And there, perhaps with drama more than other media or other literary forms, you do, I mean, Polly was saying about her play, she sort of shuts people in rooms together and kind of slightly doesn't let them out. Where, in life one might open a door and go away, but you can't in a play, you're there. And there is something sort of, not sadistic, but you're experimenting on people.
Yeah, I think you're many things, but yeah, there's an element of being a jailer.
Yeah.
And even a torturer. I mean, the Jan Kott and was similar time that Arto, although he'd written earlier that Arto became fashionable at the same time as the Jan Kott book was fashionable, and Arto's wish was, or believed that it was, he called it the theatre of cruelty, that actually theatre was something we needed to go through, and he made parallels with the plague. And that's something I've sort of written about, plague. But that necessity of being infected and getting through that and surviving, that for Arto was at the essence of theatre. And he really looked back to Shakespeare and the Jacobean playwrights as people who brought this plague into a room that we then endured for a couple of hours. Not a great marketing ploy. But I think there is some truth in that about the nature of theatre.
I mean, just before you read from your own work, I just wanted to ask you one more thing which is sort of about Shakespeare, but also maybe about you as a playwright, which was something from your sonnet when you said, a thought I think that lots of us have heard or had about Shakespeare when you said, we envy you. The language not yet fixed was a phrase you use. And although academic scholars sort of argue about this a bit, there is a sense, isn't there, that this is not necessarily something to do with Shakespeare. I mean, he was lucky. He was lucky because he wrote at a time where, for various reasons, there was an extraordinary influx, not just through him, into the language of new words and new possibilities of words and new forms of combining words. And so it was his moment as well as his talent, yes?
Yeah.
I mean, do you feel that? Is that something?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost impossible for us to conceive of. I mean, I certainly, when I've rehearsed with actors, have taken away all the punctuation that unless we really know it's there, because most of this punctuation is not in the text, but spelling as well. A language without fixed spelling is such a slippery language. So I mean, we can't do it, barely do it as a thought experiment. To use the language of semiotics, we've got a fixed relationship between the signified and the signifier, but that actually within the same play, Shakespeare can spell something in, the word bear. I don't know whether he did, but I'm just picking a word. But the word bear, that could be spelt several different ways, and sometimes he was maybe conscious of that, playful with that, and other times there was just a slippage. So that's a very slippy. The relationship between language and object, signifier and signified, is fluid, and that's an incredible thing. That was open to all people of the time, but I think as with most things, Shakespeare just really reveled in that and pushed that slipperiness as far as he possibly could, until, as we said in the panel discussion, sometimes language seems to almost break down, sort of eat itself up. It's so Escher-like.
It sounds a bit as though you think, as many literary critics have thought, that sort of that will never happen again. That's something that was unprecedented and that can never be repeated. Not that there can never be another really great writer, but that what was happening to the English language at that time just happened that time.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the same thing's not going to happen. I mean, it's interesting that the great chunk of the English playwriting tradition is, in fact, the Anglo-Irish playwriting tradition. That these people who had an older language and a new language imposed on them were able to hear English with just that slight distance and that slight sense of both criticism, maybe anger and playfulness that everybody threw from Farquhar to Shaw, and that actually got a couple of centuries there where nearly every play that we say is an English play is in fact an Anglo-Irish play. So that listening to language, both inside and outside of language, that's probably different. But
yes.
but I, you know, and I guess we get that with post-colonial literature and stuff. But just being able to move around the language and to hear it, I guess great writers can do that even if they're right in the centre of their culture. But maybe it helps if your language isn't quite so fixed, or you're aware of it being learnt or sometimes imposed.